Welcome to the buy list. This is episode 67.
This is not financial advice. This is an interview with the man himself, Bryan.
Was a, that
Welcome,
was a very
Bryan.
lawyer-like disclaimer, I have to say. So I appreciate y'all. I used to be a lawyer. I worked on Wall Street. I worked with many Wall Street firms. So nice compliance, nice disclaimers there. You would be very good clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ted thought I just did it for fun, but I work in financial services, so
You
it is
get
a
it.
little CYA on my
You
own.
understand what's going on. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I have so many questions, and just from like when you jumped on, like the crown in the back, I have so many questions. We'll save it till like the very
Okay.
end.
Okay, I'm happy to answer questions about the
Maybe.
crown.
Dude, I want to do a whole episode on the crown, but I think people want to hear from you. You, I personally like love that like you guys are so out there in the community, and like you do such a great job communicating the approach, the direction, the message, which I know I appreciate, and I know a lot of people out there appreciate. So I just want to thank you for taking the time with us today.
Dude, to me, it's like I have played TCGs for 30 years. I really just want to provide what I always wanted from, the people in charge of the TCGs I was playing. It's not really a big mystery to me. It's just like, what would I have liked to know about? What would I have liked to heard? What kind of lines of communication would I like to have open? And, some of them have proven to be maybe more trouble than they're worth, unfortunately. And I've had to modify my approach over time, but I do still very much care about giving as much insight, as much of my time as I possibly can to the community. So,
Yeah, for sure. So we're gonna start with a couple quick questions to get where you stand at. So Team Earth, Team Lightning, where
Team
we
Earth, but it's close. I know I answered that very quickly,
Yes.
so it doesn't sound close, but I've debated this a lot, and um, it's just a better fit with my vibe. I love nature. I'm a vegetarian. It just feels like if I am defining myself on that spectrum, I lean way more Earth. If y'all have seen pictures of my homestead, I try and share all the wild animals that come by with everyone. And I will say I presently have on my cameras around my property an unidentifiable wild animal right now. I do not know what it is. It's canine in nature. It may be a chupacabra.
Okay.
That's my best guess right now. But also, I've had regular visits from possums and raccoons and the multiple feral cats that I am still feeding remotely via automated cat feeder, and I think they all appreciate that a lot. So, all of these things feel very Earth-based to me. I just got to trust my gut and go with Team Earth. But I love the gameplay of the Lightning Heroes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm obviously Team Earth. Florian played him a lot this weekend, and man, I can't wait to build him in CC. I'm excited about that. Next one up is your favorite draft set. Bonus points if it hasn't been released yet.
So, to me, there's two prongs to this, right? There's actually the draft experience, and then there's the play experience. My favorite draft experience is Rosetta. I really, really love the flow of the packs. I love the kind of what we're terming a rectangular approach to a limited format where there's these two competing lanes. There's the elemental lane and then there's the class lane, and they run parallel to each other. I think that's a really intriguing setup. From a gameplay perspective, it has not been released yet.
Oh, all right.
All right.
I've been like really impressed with Misville and Rosetta so far, and I think Whisper of the Oracle, Juha, it like kind of like identified like the different shapes of the draft formats, which I thought was really cool. Is this like a shape that you guys, the rectangular shape, is this something that you guys have really taken to as like this is kind of peak drafting?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it has been my favorite experience. But also, if you follow Yuha's work, and I do, I think Yuha does a tremendous job.
Yeah.
He noted that we have never used the same shape. Now,
Yep.
I don't think that's going to stay true forever. I think you will see repeat shapes, absolutely. But we get inspired. We have new ideas we want to try, and just time and time again, we go into these things. And there's been several times where we say, okay, this is a set built around this draft shape that we've used previously. And then we get to the end of the development and it absolutely does not end up based around that shape. So as far as favorite shapes, yes, this Rosetta shape has been my favorite thus far. I wouldn't say that means we're like all in on the shape. This is how every single draft format is going to look going forward. We'll continue to experiment, continue to look for new things to do.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Favorite set to open?
Wow, that's a tough one. That's a tough one because I have a lot of nostalgia for the first sets I opened, thinking back to my first Fabled, my first cold foils, those things. They were special moments in my Flesh and Blood career, but obviously the stakes have kind of continually risen, right? And you get to something like Part the Mistveil, which was just wild in terms of the different treatments that were available. Even Uprising, though, I think Uprising did such a good job offering tons of cool variants and doing so in a way that was not overwhelming, because it can get overwhelming. Like there is a line certainly that you do not want to cross. And, I think Uprising was a very sort of chill approach to having just these cool collectibles present throughout a bunch of packs. So for me, it's very close between Uprising and Part the Mistveil so far.
I keep teasing us with these.
So far, we work so far in advance now that like it is just getting to the point where there are multiple things that I'm thinking of when I answer these questions that I want to use as my answers, and I just can't. So,
yeah. Nate and I I think we've talked about this multiple times, especially when we're talking about market topics and collectability of the game. Is that we've noted and kind of tell our viewers that don't ever take what you guys are doing as like set in stone, because everything like you guys change stuff so frequent, like every set, and it's just refreshing, right? Because it's just an extra surprise every time we go into, not even gameplay wise, right? Just collectability and treatments, like you mentioned. We've come so far from Uprising, like it kind of was the start, and then we've seen it go up and down, but with Rosetta just dropping and kind of just seeing all the extra collectability in that set, it's just been crazy. And it was a lot of fun in Tampa this past weekend.
I'm so sad I couldn't be there. I heard so many cool stories though from Tampa about the experience, about the pre-release with a little bit of mystery added into it. And I've experienced events like that before where you actually don't know the set you're setting down to play with, to draft, to play sealed with. And it's so cool. It's so exciting. There's really nothing like it. So I'm really happy we were able to offer that experience to people.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Part the Mistveil was like one of my I do usually every set, like I do a big box break with a buddy, and I think that was probably one of my like favorite sets to open so far. And just like it just feels like every box has like a new hidden gem around the corner. And it was a really fun experience. So I know you said like your first cold foil, things like that. What's your favorite part of your collection? I mean, outside of the crown of literal providence behind you, but like, what's your favorite? I got even piece of memorabilia that you've now collected.
I wish I can't pan us far enough. I don't think. I don't know if my office is safe to pan through. Honestly, there might be secrets here. But there is a giant Arachne Huntsman canvas on my wall in my office right now. And I do mean giant, just kind of looking over me, accompanied by some uncut sheets, one featuring the Marvel codexes. So that is a very, very cool thing to have accompanying Arachne on the wall. There's also just like the cards that were special to me. For instance, my first tunic came from 6 packs of Welcome to Wraith that LSS sent me in the mail the first time I tweeted out about Flesh and Blood before I had any involvement with them whatsoever. It was just like, oh, here's welcome to the game. Here's a playmat and a little gift. And it was 6 packs of WTR, and I opened them and there was my tunic in it. And I did not own a tunic at that point, and I still know which tunic that is among my several now. I have that one very clearly earmarked. And there's just like a cool little piece of history that I've now built up with this game. And there's like dozens of pieces like that throughout my time that I can point to.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
I remember when you were like first like getting into the game, and like you were on Arsenal Pass, and I was just like, who's this like magic podcaster guy? He's getting in the flesh and blood. That's pretty cool. And like you just went in like just
Yeah,
headlong.
I live
And
in New
it
Zealand
was
now, if that tells you how much I went into this
yes.
experience.
Very deep.
So
Yeah.
like what is like, let's say someone wants to be the next Bryan Gottlieb. Like they want to just like
You
they
don't want
want to
that.
move to New
You can do
Zealand,
better for
design
yourself.
cards.
Please aim higher. I'm begging you.
Like what is that like, I guess like what does that look like for someone living in the States? Like you took a very unique journey to get there. Like is that like what would be the first thing someone would do to like go on that path?
Dude, I don't even know that I can answer that because my life just feels like this ridiculous confluence of events. Like the way things break for me, it just doesn't make sense. It's just all random luck and opportunities. And like, I don't want to like over humble myself. Like I do think I'm good at what I do. I work
Mhm.
hard at what I do. All those things
Yeah.
matter a lot. And when I'm given an opportunity, I do my best to seize it. But at the same time, I just get given a lot of opportunities for some reason. I am very lucky to stumble across these things. And I like to think it comes from like the way I do business. And by that, I mean like trying to lift other people up and, you know, be a
Mm.
generally good person and making sure there's space for everyone in my communities. Like I think those things matter a lot in terms of getting good opportunities, but a huge percentage of it just has to come down to luck. Honestly, you got to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Like I think, you know, I'll pump you up a little bit. It's definitely been watching the game evolve, right? You coming on board. Um, you know, there's a, you know, a shift, and I think you've really helped Flesh and Blood grow and evolve, right? So appreciate all that you're doing. And you know, just like you were saying at the beginning of the podcast, you come on these podcasts, you do a lot of outreach, which is not nothing, right? This is time out of your day, and that's important, right, for the people that
For
play the
sure. I
game.
mean, like
So
I said, I did these podcasts, right? This is what I was doing in the
Mhm.
magic space, and I know how much it means when you can get somebody onto your show that will answer some of your questions, get you some information, give you something special to share with your listeners. Like that's really important, and I take that seriously. Uh, I have tried very, very hard to accommodate absolutely everyone who has ever wanted to chat with me a little bit. I'm eternally grateful for the fact that people even care what I have to say. It really does mean a lot to me. Yeah, and I think things like that matter in terms of, you know, building a name for yourself in this TCG space. In terms of just making a lot of friends, I think, you know, giving yourself the opportunity
Mhm.
to connect with people, it's good. It's good.
Okay. So moving on to what we were just talking about in your influence on Flesh and Blood, James has mentioned that Swing Big and maybe some of the blue eights in Everfest from Guardian in particular were some cards that he maybe regrets a bit. What's the one card that keeps Brian up at
Oh
night?
shit, man! I had a laundry list for you after the last few months. Come on. Uh,
Well, I mean, that list got a lot smaller 2 weeks
yeah,
ago, right? Or a week ago.
that does help. Yeah, look, I've said a bunch about Traverse already. I just really wish Traverse did not block for two. That haunts me
Hmm.
because it is just a complete unforced error. We can have a lot of other conversations around Traverse and its power level, but the
Yeah.
one thing that is just abundantly clear to me as a flat out mistake, two defense did not have to be there. Um,
Mhm.
Other cards that keep me up at night. Man, that has occupied so much of my brain space recently that it's hard to even pull out some other ones. But like certainly the period we went through with Zen, you know, not our best metagame. We messed up. We missed a very, very powerful deck. Not wholesale missed it, but our versions were not good enough. And that entire experience has kept me up because Part the Mistveil is such a special set. It's really hard that so much of it has been overshadowed by this mistake. All right. And I'm just grateful that we're an organization that can accept those mistakes, not double down on those mistakes, and look to address those mistakes. And I am hopeful that as we head into this Rosetta metagame with this seismic change that we worked very, very hard on delivering, we can find a little appreciation for Part the Mistveil in the rear view. I know we're moving to Rosetta now, and certainly that's going to be everyone's focus, but there's a lot of cool stuff in Part the Mistveil. It's a very, very special set, both limited and CC wise. It just is one that we missed the mark as far as power level goes. And now with things toned down a little bit, I hope people can really appreciate the play patterns, the experiences that these heroes are going to add to the broader metagame.
I loved Part the Mistveil, and I'm excited to be able to play Enigma again without fear of Zen.
There might be some new fears around the corner for you, though. Don't get too comfortable too fast. But
yeah, I've played a couple games so far, and there's some things I do have some questions about. Why Runeblade have all discard? Like, realistically though, like discard, is this going to be a class identity for like specific classes, or is this like across the board, like anybody can get it? But Runeblade got a ton of discard this set, and they're looking like they're kind of back in style.
Yep. I think discard has always been in the Runeblade flavor pie. It absolutely is something they have engaged with in the past. You can point to things like Consuming Volition. There's other discard effects out there that Runeblade has dabbled in. It has certainly been a little bit lower down the scale. But it's just one of those things. And this is kind of a lot of where the need to do something dramatic, like the rewriting the book article that came out a couple of weeks ago, comes from, is that we're in a non-rotating game. And the reality is that every interesting effect you want to make, every cool card you want to make, is going to combine with the stuff in the past. And that means when you have a new discard effect you want to make, well, that gets added to the discard effects that were already made previously. And that means that heroes can start to shift in a direction that is like, oh, this is actually like a very discard-centric build of Runeblade that you can do now. We have to be okay with that. We have to continue to check in on how far along the spectrum these things go. I think discard is like, it's an important mode of interaction in our game. It's not something that we want to wholesale abandon. And indeed, like, it's in generic, right? You can look to effects like Pummel being able to provide discard. I would even point to CNC as being like quasi discard, right? Like all of this stuff is basically discard. And it's because it's a main mode of interaction in Flesh and Blood. It's important. It's something that we continue to do in fairly large doses. Are there some classes that, are all numbers or are all wards? Yeah, they may not engage with that type of thing. But in general, the heroes that are looking for that little bit of disruption, looking to attack a little bit, like even brutes are a class that I would point to as, depending on how broadly you want to define discard, more and more brutes are dabbling in discard. They're getting these disruptive effects. And it is important that all classes are able to do this in ways that feel appropriate to their class. That's always the most important part. And if you felt that the discard in the set was kind of an inappropriate application of how Runeblades are supposed to force the issue, that would be a complaint I would wholeheartedly engage with and discuss, because it's really important we make sure we stay true to that flavor. But it being present, it's just not a problem for me. I think it is something that is supposed to be here.
Yeah, no, I was surprised to see so many discard effects. I don't think it's necessarily because like there's Rika Corruption, there's Consuming Volition, which are we haven't seen a bunch of play. It feels like it was like this is what we want to see as like part of an archetype, and we're making it very apparent.
I want to thank you for that, by the way. As a Runeblade main, I very famously have always been on. I played Chain all the time, Brian, and maybe I just didn't understand what rune blades are, but the more you just went through that answer, I'm like, okay, I can get down with these cards.
But you see, this
Like, I'm
is
very
the story of
excited
my
for
life,
it.
guys. It's the one person on this side saying, "Why did you do this?" and the other person on this side saying, "Thank you for doing this." This is just my day-to-day
Yeah,
existence.
Yes.
yeah. So I do have a question that's kind of around this as well. Is that we talked a couple years back at Nats in Vegas quickly. It was right after Vincent came out. And I asked about, because it, just her hero art and things like that looked like she could possibly have a shield one day. And so I asked about that. I was like, oh, maybe she can get an offhand that is some sort of shield block rune chant thing effect, right? And you had mentioned to me, oh, that's not in Runeblade's design space. And I was curious if you could elaborate a little bit on that, since we are talking about discard being part of that design space. Is that more a lore? Is it twofold? Is that lore based, or is it more game based? Just like trying to make sure that archetype doesn't get just a complete suite of armor when they really shouldn't.
It's a little bit of both. And frankly, I should never say things like that authoritatively, right? I don't want to completely discount the
Yeah.
possibility of a shield one day being something Runeblade gets access to. But the kind of default setup for a Runeblade is you have either your big sword, your way of, engaging with the physical side of the game, although in Rosetta Thorn's case, your way of engaging with both sides of the game. Or you have this kind of, I would say, almost utility suite. Like that's kind of how I look at Set's kit, where you show up with, your flail and your book, and that's your setup instead.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty important that those are the spaces that Runeblade engages with, because if not, there starts to be some pushback as to like what actually is a Runeblade. And I think Runeblade is already the most
Mm-hmm.
nebulous class, right? They can do a little bit of everything, and they're
Yeah.
supposed to be a jack of all trades. That's not a failing of the Runeblade design. It's what they're supposed to be doing. Um, but you have to have some limits on that, right? Otherwise, it just becomes
Right.
this
Yeah.
best of mishmash of nonsense. Like, oh, here's
Mm-hmm.
shield rune blade, and here is sword rune blade, and here is arcane damage rune blade, and you have to prepare for all of them. And oh, by the way, this one hero can present 6 different game plans, and you need to be aware of all of them. And it just gets out of control at some point. So it is just generally how rune blades are set up right now. They are not intended to be the close quarters, hand to hand combat class
Yeah.
the way that either guardian or warrior is. Like those stand out to me as the two
Mm-hmm.
homes for shields at this moment in time, the two most clear homes for shields. Does that mean those are the only classes that will ever get shields? Absolutely not. There's plenty of space to push up against the limits, but you have to do so in a smart way, in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So for right now, no shields for rune blades.
I'm okay with that. I'll take the discards.
Good choice.
now
How about a
that
shield
Runeblade is
that
broken, would you?
discards? Huh?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Sign me up.
Yep. Ted will not say no
Keep them
to
coming.
that. To kind of piggyback off that one, and I'm sorry, we were kind of like all over the place and going a little going 8 different directions, but so I'm Team Lightning. I've been mainlining Acilio for like the last 3 days, and literally it's the only thing I can think
I
about.
know that feeling very
Um,
well.
but oh man, how do I try to describe him as almost like kind of like lightning Phi.
Okay.
It's kind of like where he feels like for me. It's just like you want all this go again, and you just want to end on your lava burst. And Inverdance feels very different as well. And the wizard class it's taking on a lot of different shapes, it feels like. And I guess I don't really have a question. I just love wizards. And like I guess do we see like more do we see a move back to potentially more Kano style wizards when Kano LLs, or is like Kano kind of presenting a little bit of a problem in design space because he can just he if he gets too big of a card pool, he gets kind of crazy.
So look, we've sort of re-engaged with that space with Blaze and Blitz, right? So it's
Mhm.
not impossible that we go down that route again. But I just think there's
Yeah.
a lot more to kind of learn and understand about wizards. There's a lot more wizards can do. Again, when you talk about wizarding as like a classic high fantasy archetype, it does feel like one of those blank slates. Like there's a lot of different ways that a wizard can be represented via mechanics, via flavor, and I would like to do all of them. I think they're all quite interesting. And so that leads to some weird scenarios where people just like wanted their next Kano, or I think in the case of Rosetta, I think people really wanted their next Icelander. I think there was a lot of feels that like that would be the way Wizards looked in this set. And to be fair, I think there are elements of Verdansk that are absolutely Icelander leaning. There is very much a Bullander kind of vibe going on there that you can get to. But it's different. It does not play on your opponent's turn. It offers a different pace to wizarding. And I just think Wizard is such a rich class, and it is also one of the least explored classes up until the release of Rosetta, right? Just a complete blank slate as far as all the things we can do. And you have to, there's no easy way to say this other than like things take a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to bring forth new visions. It takes a lot of time to fill in heroes with kits that are not up to the task right now. You just have to kind of wait for your moment to come around. You have to wait for the next cycle. And even 5 years into this game at this point, there are moments where it still feels very young to me. And I think that is doubly true because of the hero-centric and class-centric nature of this game. Because yes, we have done a ton of sets now, but a lot of them are partitioned, right? They're only engaging with a certain part of the broader game pieces. And, you know, we've opened that up a little bit with things like the expansion slot. And now every set engages with the entire game a little bit more, but still the bulk of cards are going to be siloed. And that's very different from something like, say, Magic the Gathering or Lorcana, which has like, you know, it's 5 lanes. And then in every set, you release cards for those 5 lanes. And you do that over and over until the end of time. And that just means those things grow broader and broader. In our case, we have a ton of classes, and all those classes can then be further combined with talents. And it's one of the reasons why I'm grateful that our game is a non-rotating game at its core, and particularly grateful for the Living Legend format. Is just like we're going to get time to build all this stuff out and see what happens when, you know, Earth Wizard finally gets to square up against Baseline Wizard, which is something that people have speculated around for years and years. And all of these things will eventually come to fruition, but it's going to take a lot of time.
Yes. I'm really excited to continue. Like it just feels like every set you get something new, and it just deepens that like relationship with the game. And like you just like it's you like it's kind of like an onion. You're just like slowly pulling back the layers, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
And I love
Sometimes it feels
Cilio.
like
I'm getting
everyone
into
wants
Cilio shit.
to like hit the completed state, right? Like where everything is
Yes.
like every kit is fully fleshed out, every hero is equally viable, and I think there's a lot of joy in the journey, honestly.
Yeah. So since we're talking about wizards a little bit and Acilio, I did have a question about Florian. Did Florian, I haven't really even started building with him yet. I just played the seal pools over the weekend. And it feels like he's kind of dual type where he could be a mid-range deck where you're just dealing lots of rune chance, big decompose or big earth numbers, right? And then also there was even a hint in the BNR about an OTK version of him, and he does have a number of tools that instantly scream, "Oh, that could be interesting." I believe the the name is escaping me right now, but the heal
Germinate.
equal or create rune chance, germinate life. That seems like an OTK tool. Did he start out as a mid range and then it said, oh, and then you guys said, oh, this hero ability could be fun. We could add in like a build up a mass amount of rune chance game plan, but you have to really work for it. Or was it kind of always in the
Heroes
books?
enter development more as blank slates, honestly. It's just like, here is this ability. What does this mean? What can you do with this? Like, here's a canvas, paint your picture, and let's see what kind of pictures
Mm-hmm.
develop. And sometimes you get a beautiful picture, sometimes you get a disaster. And that means like, this is actually not what we want to do. And Florian very much felt like that canvas when it arrived. And very quickly, we were building across the spectrum. We had OTK decks, we had mid-range decks, we had decks that frankly were aggressive leaning, like CMH decks. And all these things
Mm-hmm.
feel within range for Florian. And it's one of the reasons why I think he is the hero that ultimately ended up speaking to me the most out of this set, is just the sheer diversity of game plans you can actually offer, and how well those game plans shift across metagames. Like, depending on what you were expecting to face, it really does feel like Florian has a lot of options for everything that can come to the table. And that's really exciting to me. It's the type of hero that you can invest a lot in, right? And you can decide, oh, I'm a Florian
Mm-hmm.
main. And you don't get closed out when the metagame turns in a particular direction. Like, are there harder matchups? Sure. Things like Enigma are tough. Like, you're not a super action point rich deck, but can you build in a way that like the Enigma matchup is palatable? Yeah, you absolutely can. There's all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
different builds available to Florian. So if that was your biggest concern in the metagame, I don't think you actually have to put Florian on the shelf. You can take an acceptable matchup into that deck and then hope to be really strong against everything else. So I think the depth of that hero just kind of speaks for itself, and it did so from the moment it entered our development pipeline.
Yeah, his journey, right? I forgot the exact terminology, but like getting his decompose online, even in the seal pool, yes, they happened pretty quick this weekend, right? It was fairly easy to get those 4 earth cards in the banish zone, but just understanding it's like, oh, I gotta pitch this for later because once I'm online, now this ends the game, right? I now make 6 rune chance or 7 rune chance with this. I gotta manage that. It was very rewarding,
Mm-hmm.
right? To like kind of work through that process. Where if I look back at Mistvale, I had a ton of fun transcending as well, right? But that was more like instant
Yeah.
power punch, punch in right now. Where Florian is much like slow burn, like I set up for later and then come at you. So I'm excited to see what I can brew up in CC with him
Yeah,
for
he's a lot
sure.
of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my teammates, I call him the Walter White, because he's kind of always cooking just crazy brews, and he's, I think, already built like 6 decks for Florian, just like you said, CMH, OTK, mid range, just all sorts. And it does feel like a very fun brew to work
Yep.
with, and like talking about like hero design, where do like do you start with a limited, like you said, like they come in and it's kind of like blank sites, here's the hero ability, how do we build around this? Do you target limited first with that, or then do you target like CC when you start to kind of build out the kits and make sure that these heroes are
It
viable?
really depends. It's a per pipeline question, and it depends a lot on like where our concerns lie, the things we are able to identify during our alpha phases, as like things we have to get validated as soon as possible. But in general, there's kind of like baseline function checks across both formats very early on. So things will leave alpha testing, go into the broader development pipeline, and just very quickly you get in a limited session and then an early CC session, and just baseline check: is this functioning? Is there actual fertile ground here? Can we continue to explore this? Because if not, you have a problem, right? And we work on fixed
Hmm.
schedules. We have to deliver something. So it's critical that if something is
Yeah.
going to fail, you're able to figure that out as soon as possible in the process. So early stages are just across both formats, just checking, does this actually work? Is this a functioning hero?
I love the fertile ground reference. Um, um, to touch on that, now I've seen like you and Kieran in the booth. Sometimes you guys like call a card and you're like, no, wait, that's not what it's called anymore. Are there any names that you're just like, man, I really wish we would have stuck with that in development?
Yep. And I'm not going to tell you them because there, no,
No.
there's one that comes to mind. It was a very funny joke, um, and an appropriate joke. It wasn't like out of line. That's why I'm not sharing it. But it is just a nod to a community member. And every time we played it, it made the entire dev room laugh. And I still think about it. And I'm not going to share it because I don't want that person to feel targeted. It wasn't about targeting that person. It was just like a cool way to reference this person. And it was very, very funny. And maybe someday, with that person's blessing, I will share it. That is what I'll do first. I'll make sure they're cool with it, and then I will tell you about it.
Great. So
I'm just happy that we now know that these dev names get pretty zany.
They can. Yep, they can.
That's great. Speaking about, I guess, we're talking about the upfront of development, and then, we are, more collectible based. So I did have a question about on the back end. So when you've got a set ready to go, and I guess I'm making a big assumption here that the collectability side and the people that work on the special EA treatments and the, what should be a Marvel in this set, you start working with them. How does that interaction work? Is it I guess let me explain myself. So in Uprising, we started to see EA commons and rares and things like that, and it's progressed quite rapidly towards a very meaningful treatments of cards. Right? I again been set fan, so I lean towards that the 3 Majestics for her are going to be 3 ofs in most of her decks. So make those EA, right? And we've seen that transition, and it's been really fun collectability wise to play with your collectibles. So I was just curious, like, how does that start? Do you point out to them, hey, let's make this card special? We think that this card is going to see lots of play, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are 2 lead developers. There's myself, and I have a dual title. I'm a lead developer and a senior designer. Our other lead developer, Chris Gehring, also has a dual title. He is a lead developer and he's a product engineer. And he is chiefly responsible, alongside our creative team and James, of course, in deciding what exactly is going to go ahead and get these special treatments. And he is absolutely a collector. Like, he believes in supporting the box opening experience. He believes in making every pack interesting. And he has really, really worked hard to ensure that the opening experience is exciting every time, that there are these unique treatments for everyone to go ahead and collect without things getting gimmicky, because obviously that's always a concern. There's a fine line between offering excitement and things just feeling overwhelming and gimmicky. And he works really hard with our creative partners and James to deliver on that. And I think he's gotten really good at it. Like, he's really, really good at honing in on exactly what deserves these special treatments, the cool stuff we can do, the secrets we can keep as we head into these seasons. Obviously, we saw the Rosetta Thorn reveal when we were down in Tampa. Things like that are just, they're part of a real initiative to just add excitement to these packs. And a huge portion of the credit for that goes to Chris.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And like I said, it's been fun to see that change and evolve and get to a point where, I like my Vincent deck has all 9 of them and they're all EA, and that just makes me smile every time.
Cool.
I
It's a
banish
cool little
one and
thing
get
that
to
you can
play one,
engage with
right?
if you
It's
want
just,
to.
yeah.
You can completely ignore it if you don't want to. You can go ahead and trade those things away and, get some other cards you want. I think that's the right way to do those things.
Yep. And I guess you brought up the Thorn. So we found out that there was a very special Thorn in Rosetta, and then also a Marvel Briar and a young and adult version in Rosetta. So we know over the last 6 months or so, LSS has, and you yourself at the keynote and such, has put a strong emphasis on LL now. Is this was this more of a nod to like doubling down on that strong emphasis? We have callings, we have skirmishes now with LL, or was it just a nod to where we went back to Aria? I guess it's probably both, but just curious what the thought is. Bringing that hero back, right? That is currently LL'd in both formats.
Yeah, it's both, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is less like, it's not that one necessitates the other or pushes us towards doing the other. It just
Mhm.
generally feels a lot better that we do have that home, and there is a space that, you know, these heroes can go to and these collector showpieces can go to and have a long, endless life. Hopefully, obviously, there's, you know, always a possibility of bans. You don't guarantee anything forever, but
Mhm.
theoretically, you should be able to bring that Rosetta Thorn to the Living Legend tables for a very, very long time. And I hope that is the case. And I think that is important if we are going to continue to create showpieces like this, that you get a good amount of longevity out of them and you have homes for them.
Yeah, I agree. Rosetta Thorn did nothing wrong. I'll stick with that.
You know, I mostly agree at this point. Obviously, like
Yes.
at the point the card released, it looked pretty powerful. But that card settled into a completely fine place by the end of its life cycle, even in Blitz, even in a format with only 20 life. Like
Mhm.
Briar did not dominate the Blitz format. Certainly, there were other things that were way too strong in Blitz that were holding her back. But I don't know. When I played games against Rosetta Thorn, I was like, this is a powerful card that is still completely within the bounds of fairness. And, you know, is it among the best weapons ever printed? For sure, without a doubt. Did it
Yeah.
cross a line? I don't really think so anymore. I really don't feel that way.
I always point to the haters, Brian, and say Winter's Whale was banned. Rosetta wasn't. So
I think correctly so. I really do. Like I think that was the
yeah.
right call.
Ted's letting his Runeblade show. Winter Whale
Dude,
did nothing wrong.
Wintersville did some wrong
no.
things, some very wrong things along the way.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I've been some wrong things have been done to me.
That's fair. That's fair. I played a lot of Oldhim. I enjoyed him. Obviously cards get banned from time to time. The BNR, this most recent one, has been, I think, incredibly well received. I think it really helps that you guys write these like articles of what you're thinking and the like thought process behind them, not just like here are cards that are banned. Good luck. Um, and I always really appreciate them. So is I know there's like a lot of like talk about like kind of resetting, like kind of like design 2.0 almost with like Lexi had maybe too much excess action points, which I love playing in LL now. Speaking of LL, do you think because the game is eternal that like there's going to be these kind of like resets where it's like, you know what, actually there's too much draw effect right now, we're gonna have to pull that back, where in classic constructed that's gonna have to kind of get reset every maybe couple of years, where it's like we need to pull this back a little bit, and then LL is the fun playground?
Yeah, I do think that. I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation to have for a game that does not rotate. I think
Yeah.
one of the biggest threats to stability of the game system, but I'll say even more than that, like to actually getting the opportunity to play interesting games is redundancy. Redundancy is a real joy thief. It is something
Mhm.
that the best decks will always have roots in redundancy and being able to achieve things with consistency.
Yeah.
And one of the perils of a non-rotating game is that as the card pool gets larger, there will be more and more redundancy. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway you could have from this adjustment is it wasn't any one of these card draw pieces in and of itself. Because if that was the case, we could have just come to the table and banned Art of War, right? And that would have been fine. That would have
Mhm.
fixed the problem. But it wasn't really that. It was the fact that you were able to consistently create offensive overlaps by combining multiples of these effects with each other. And it was just letting hand sizes get out of control and, you know, contributing some pretty unfun game states, frankly. And it's all about redundancy. That's how you get to that point. So
Yeah.
with a non-rotating game, we will have to be vigilant. We'll have to check in consistently on are these effects becoming too prevalent? And it's very easy to point to the next big picture things that could get out of control with redundancy. Life gain. If there's too much life gain, maybe that becomes a problem at some point. Just good defensive cards, too many big defense reactions.
Mm.
If that's the case, you could see the game have some problems in a different direction than we did this most recent go around. All these things are going to have their pools carefully managed over time. I think it is a way more preferable moment to moment experience if we are willing to push boundaries and occasionally hit those boundaries than if we just say, oh, maybe long term, this card, like 10 years from now, I anticipate this card will be a problem, so we shouldn't make it. Because if
Yeah.
we're doing things like that, I can tell you multiple cards in Rosetta that would not have gotten made. I'll call out Call to the Grave. Like that card doesn't get made if we are thinking like, oh, this has to be completely safe forever and untouchable, and it, can't ever present a problem. That card has a lot of potential to create problems down the road, maybe even immediately. It's
Yeah.
a very, very high risk, exciting card that offers a lot to a lot of different heroes.
Yeah.
And if you're asking me which world do I want to live in, the one where that card doesn't get made because it could be a problem in 10 years, or the world where that card gets banned in 10 years, I'm living in the ban that card in 10 years world every single time. It's not even a question to me. So I think it's just important that we continue to communicate effectively with our player base, that they know things like this, that they know how we use the banned and restricted list as kind of a tool to balance the game, that we're not afraid of our banned and restricted list. We don't look at it as a scarlet letter that we have to wear when we ban something. It's just a tool, and we'll continue to use it as time goes on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like to back up your point, Nate, is that everyone I talked to in Tampa was overwhelmingly positive about it, right? And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't expect it to be like almost 95% of
Me neither.
people. I talked to one guy that was like, "Man, Auto War was too far," and I was like, I kind of get it though. Like if you read the article and you really sit down and think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So I think a lot of people got that message. Um, so that yeah, it was really good. I did have a question. I noticed that every time you come on a podcast or when you engage, right, you do mention you're like, this happened a long time ago, right? And I had a question about balance of justice. Was balance of justice kind of the let's try to stop this leak, see if this card can prevent us from really having to do this large deep dive into card draw in the game?
I wouldn't say it was designed as a preventative measure. It wasn't like, oh, we have this plan and we'll do it if balance
Yeah.
of justice doesn't work. But it was in response to identifying a play pattern that was, becoming more and more prevalent and trying to patch up
Mm-hmm.
that weakness a little bit, which, in the short term, balance of justice did an okay job of that. Like I think it worked
Yeah.
probably in the heavy hitters meta to go ahead and address that. And, certainly not having it for the part the Misfell meta would have been far worse. I am happy it was there for it. It didn't ultimately solve the problem, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't intended to solve the problem. It was just tended to be
Yeah.
a bit of a reaction to something we perceived.
Yeah. Check. Makes sense.
I have a question about like Fabled design. I'm always curious because it's like this one card. It's the Super Chase. What challenges like have you had like balancing? I'm assuming they start as lore pieces, but I might be wrong. Like, what challenges do you have when trying to balance lore and playability, and not trying to like push it kind of too far towards playability while making it super desirable?
Yeah, I just want to say that we are not inherently opposed to the idea of playable fables. Like I think a
Yeah.
lot of time that message gets repeated and it's not entirely true. Like if a fable makes its way into decks, I see that as a positive. I don't want it to be an
Yes.
auto
Yeah.
include. Like I think that is a different scenario. I think there should be real downsides to including fableds in your deck. And frankly, by virtue of their design, there almost always is. A no block is risky. Like it carries some real
Mm.
downside. And you see even the decks that have this predilection for Fables, they come in and out based on the metagame all the time. I've seen Prism lists without Light of Soul. I've seen Prism lists without Library. That absolutely happens. Certainly, Eye of Ophidia in Kano has been all over the place. You can even go back to like Heart of Fyendel, which is probably like the closest auto include we've seen in like Icelander. But even still, there were certainly decks that did not play Heart. And I think it is important that that is a decision you have to make over and over with these cards. As far as design of them, I will tell you my baseline for Fables and how I like to approach them when we're building out the set. I would like to make the most obvious Fable possible at all times. What that means is I want one that just directly engages with sort of a core mechanic of the set. When people are speculating about what the Fable could be, I would like a couple of people to guess correctly. I think they're just like these resonant flavor pieces that are supposed to speak to exactly what the set is about. And if you look back over the course of our last few Fables, particularly with gems, I think this rings true with gems. But I would also say Deathmatch Arena like succeeds on this level as well, even if it's a bit of an unexpected place for the card to go. But like Light of Soul, Master Cog, maybe even like I would say some good things about Blood of the Drakai. I think like all of these gems go to the right place. They offer the right experience. And to me, that is where the flavor of Fables is supposed to be. It's just supposed to point very, very hard at the core mechanic of the set. Balancing that, there's knobs. There's always knobs, right? There's, I can go back to Plague Hive, right? Like Plague Hive, you used to choose the thing you made. That was way too good. It had to be random. Maybe there were points where colors were different on some of these gems. I think Master Cog at some point was probably a blue, and that felt a little bit too much and got shifted. But there's plenty of knobs on these cards. And so if you get the theming right, you can almost always find a way to get them into the right spot.
Yeah, I definitely misread Plague Hive and was like, oh my God, this Fabled. Oh my God, it's going in every deck. And then someone pointed out to me, like, no, you gotta learn to read, dude. I was like, oh.
But I love where that Fabled landed. Sense. Like it occasionally sees a little bit of play. When it does, it's often very powerful. Until you are trying to defend with a hand with Plague Hive, and it feels very bad. And I just think, again, I never, ever present us as infallible. Like I just don't believe that. At some point, we'll mess up a Fable. Get ready for it. It's going to happen at some point. But I do think we've done a good job with them thus far.
I like making my 3 best friends roll in UPF games. And when they get blood pox, it's the best.
Yeah, that's good.
It's very fun. Yeah. I make use of it.
Yeah, I agree. Like when I read Will of Arcana, I was like, oh man, they just printed an absolute banger. And then I like sat down and thought about it a little more. I was like, no, I actually have to make that decision. Like I was like, this goes in every wizard deck. It's insane. And it's like, all right, Acilio already has 1,000 no blocks.
You really want 1,001 no blocks? That's the question.
If it was an instant, I'm all in. But I can't get this card out of my hand, and half the time I don't want to pitch. So it's like, all right, maybe one deck. But no, I think like you guys have done a fantastic job with the Fables and just keeping them right in that like borderline. Like I call it like the like, okay, I see you. Like territory, like all right,
that's a good spot for them to be.
I'm gonna check back in on you.
Yeah. Okay. As I think as we wrap up here with you, Bryan, we'll respect your time. I did have a question. So we got some very cool news for Worlds with Ira coming back to. No, she's coming to CC as an adult hero now. Ever since the first time I played this game, I've been told that Ira as an adult would just be broken. Is that true?
You're going to find out, right? There's no escaping it anymore. You're going to learn if it's broken.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's been it's funny when I saw it released, I was like, oh man, here we go. Like the eternal debate of like, man, they can't make Ira as an adult. It's just too broken. Think of all the plus ones. I can plus one a snatch. I can plus one a CNC. It's like, all right, we're gonna figure it out now.
Yep, we are.
Yep.
Look, I'm a big Ira fan.
Um,
I actually played a ton of Ira in Blitz. And more importantly, though, I started playing Fab very, very tail end of Monarch. So I'm not a Fab boomer. I was not around from the beginning. But now, being here in New Zealand with the dev team, I'm around basically mono Fab boomers all the time. The boomerist of boomers, if you will, the people who played Fab before it even
right.
existed.
Do they let you know about it all the time?
They just love Ira so much. That's what they let me know about. And they'll talk about playing, the Ira welcome deck mirrors all the time. And these things, it stands out as an experience that core group, the OGs, have been waiting for so long. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something we've dabbled in the past. It's something we've looked at. And it did feel like 5th anniversary was just the perfect time. And to bring it to Osaka as well, and that weekend, the World Championship weekend, it was just such a perfect fit. Almost feels like a no-brainer. Like now that it's announced, it's like, of course, there's Adult Ira being released at this time.
Yeah.
It is just a perfect fit. And I'm looking forward to playing her in CC again for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess a slight follow-up question, but I'm not going to put you on the spot because I don't think you'll be able to answer this question. So we know that Dash IO is coming to an Armory deck, and we know that you mentioned that there was a new hero coming in November to an Armory deck. I'm just going to leave it there though. But my real question is, oh, no reaction, man. Stone cold over there.
He was ready for it.
He was ready. Okay, so, but my real question is about Armory.
Fuck that. I'm just going to tell you. It's not Ira. It's not Ira.
Oh.
So
okay. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for that scoop. That's awesome. And now I'm even more excited about it. I thought it would make sense, but man, now I'm spinning. Bryan, you got me all.
Sorry. I didn't mean to throw you up
here. But my question was, you had mentioned that Armory decks can be a tool, not just only to bring a new hero, or like you said, we're just starting with Armory decks. Can an Armory deck bring a new class to Flesh and Blood?
Sure. I think so.
That's exciting.
Obviously, there's a lot of questions around what that looks like. It's going to be very hard to deliver a top tier hero on the basis of just an Armory deck. Like that's a big ask, but I don't know. I just think it's important that, and I try to emphasize this in every single bit of, I don't know if press is the right word. Every time I speak to the community, I try to emphasize that there really aren't any rules. Like if it is cool and we want to do it, we're going to do it. And I don't have a reason why we would not be able to do what you just said. So why would I say no? Like it just doesn't seem to make any sense. If there's a cool thing we can do in that space, we will do it. That's always our rule.
All right. So Necromancer. Just kidding.
In preparation for this,
hard. Let's just keep it going. Let's do it.
Oh yeah. Dude. I'm in for all of it.
When we were preparing for this interview, Ted told me I couldn't ask the question, and it was cut.
The one that I don't know if you've
ever seen Mean Girls. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if you've ever seen Mean Girls, but I think it's like Gretchen Wieners is always trying to like make fetch happen. Which one of the devs is the one who finally made Ira happen? Like, was there like a dev who was just beating that Ira drum like over and over again? And was it Mr. Classic?
I think it is just James that made Ira happen. But it's funny that you reference this with Mean Girls, because I actually went with James to the movies to see the new Mean Girls when it came out. We went with our families together to watch that. Yeah. And we left in the middle of it. It was so bad. Like James and his daughter actually went to the arcade to go play video games instead in the middle of the new Mean Girls. So it's very funny that you mention it in conjunction with this particular decision, but I do think it was just, James paying tribute to the history of the game and finding a great fit for Ira here. Or, it is possible. I'll tell you, I wasn't involved in this conversation. It's possible Chris Gehring, again, product engineering, also had a lot to do with this finally being the moment where Ira finally hit.
Yeah. I just wanted to know which one of the devs was always trying to make fetch happen, and then like Ira came out like right before this, and I was like, well, now I gotta ask about Ira. Like, who made Ira? Like was there someone beating that drum? And hearing like you guys talk on Dev Talk about how like you're like having money Ira Blitz deck games, and like it. I was just like, man, there was definitely someone in that dev room who's always trying to make fetch happen.
I just think like Ira is a big hit in general in the dev room. Like I think everyone at LSS, like when you're here from the beginning, you just have such a connection to Ira, and I think that's why it just was the perfect hero.
Perfect. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Bryan, thank you so much for an hour of your time. I know we've mentioned this already a couple times, but it really means a lot to myself and Nate.
I'm always happy to chat with y'all. I also promised that before we wrapped up, I would actually put on the Crown of Providence. I speak to people all the time from this office, and they see the Crown of Providence back there, and they just think it's like a small showpiece. They don't realize this is how I do all of my development and design work. It's always done within the Crown of Providence. So now you know.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's real deal. All right, Bryan, thank you so much, and like, subscribe, everybody. Let's catch you next time. Peace.